Merry Christmas from Royal Court Motors. This year, we're doing something extra special for the community. Everybody in the metro Atlanta area, we're giving you your down payment. If you bring $1,000 to us, we're going to make it $2,000. If you bring $2,000 to us, we're going to make it $4,000. Merry Christmas. We approving everybody, so come get financed with us so you can drive around in a nice car and you can look like the royalty that you are.
And other stories we're tracking this Saturday evening. We now know the identity of a woman shot and killed last night at a Gwinnett County car dealership. 34-year-old Courtney Owens from Snellville was an employee of Royal Court Motors in Centerville. Witnesses told police they saw a man carrying a firearm and wearing a mask go inside the business, shoot Owens, and then leave. No word yet on the search for a suspect or a motive in this shooting.
A man was interviewed by police at the scene the same night she was killed. He answered every question they had. He went home. He created a tribute post for the woman. Investigators would later say he paid $20,000 to have murdered. And then, when he realized the walls were closing in, he ran. He was gone for 3 months. When they finally found him, he was not hiding. He was not desperate. He was not looking over his shoulder. He was playing golf outside Houston, Texas, on a sunny afternoon, while a 12-year-old boy in Georgia was learning how to live without his mother. That is the kind of confidence that only comes from believing you are going to get away with it. And in many ways, he did. You are watching Silent Outcome. Before we continue, like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss a case like this.
Hey y'all, welcome to Royal Court Motors. Check us out, www.royalcourtmotors.com. Check out our inventory. We take care of low credit, no credit, bad credit, low down payments on these vehicles. We got Maseratis out here. We got Chargers, Jaguars. We got semi-trucks for sale. Come check us out. Down payments as low as $500. Give us a call at 77.
Her name was Courtney Owens. She was 34 years old. She co-owned a car dealership in Snellville, Georgia called Royal Court Motors, a business her mother Andrea would later say she built from the ground up with her own hands. She had a son. She had plans. She had a future that was not theoretical but actual and moving and alive. On the 9th of December 2022, she drove to that dealership on a regular Friday afternoon to handle some business. There was nothing unusual about the day. Nothing that would have told anyone who loved her to call, to check in, to ask her to stay home. She walked through the door of the business she helped build, and she never walked back out. Courtney grew up understanding that nothing worth having comes without work. That was not something she read somewhere. It was something she lived. By the time she was in her early 30s, she had turned that understanding into something concrete, a used car dealership with her name on it, her decisions running through it, her future built on top of it. Royal Court Motors was not a side project. It was not something she stumbled into. It was the thing she chose, pursued, and built with her own hands in an industry that does not make space easily for Black women who show up and decide they belong there. She showed up anyway. She decided anyway. And then she built it. Her mother, Andrea, watched her do it, watched her move through the world with a kind of focused, deliberate energy that most people spend their whole lives searching for. She was building a business and raising a son, and those two things together were the full shape of the future she was working toward every single day. She was 34 years old. That number sits right at the beginning of everything. Old enough to know exactly who you are and what you want. Young enough that the distance between where you are and where you are going still feels like possibility rather than regret. Courtney was not waiting for her life to start. It had already started. She was deep inside it, pushing it forward in a direction she had chosen for herself, making decisions that had weight and consequence and momentum behind them. That is what gets lost when a story like this gets reduced to headlines and case numbers. The headlines capture the ending. They do not capture what was in motion the day before. They do not capture the version of Courtney that existed on the 8th of December 2022, the day before all of it, when she was simply a woman with a business to run and a son to raise and plans already moving. She had built something real. She was in the process of reshaping it on her own terms. And the future she was building was not somewhere far off in the distance. It was close enough to touch. She could feel it getting closer. Stoney Williams came into Courtney's life the way a lot of things do gradually, then completely. They were partners, first personally, then professionally, then both at once, in the way that makes it almost impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. They built Royal Court Motors together. Their names were both on the business. Their decisions shaped it. Their money moved through it. And when the romantic relationship ended, the business did not. That is the detail that matters. Because as long as the business remained shared, Williams still had access to her world. He still had a reason to be in her orbit. He still had his name next to hers on documents that represented real money and real assets. But there was something else running underneath the surface of that shared professional life. Something that would only become fully visible once investigators started pulling the threads. Williams had at least a dozen documented aliases, not 2 or 3, at least 12. Sherrod Eric Henry, Jaheim Lamar, Lawrence Tyrell Robinson, ex-Superman, Stanley Williams, Stoney Lee Williams, and others. That is not the behavior of someone with nothing to conceal. That is the behavior of someone who has spent years making sure different people in his life know only the version of him he chooses to show them. A man who operates that way does not keep that habit contained to one corner of his life. It spreads through everything. And then there was the Fairburn shooting. Weeks before December 9th, prosecutors alleged that Williams paid Wesley Vickers $4,800 to drive to the house where Courtney was staying with a friend and open fire on it. There was a child inside that house. Vickers shot it up and drove away. Prosecutors described it plainly. Williams wanted to send a message, not to kill her yet, to make her feel something dangerous moving in around the edges of her life before she could identify where it was coming from or who had directed it toward her. She was already trying to leave, and according to prosecutors, he was already building a wall of fear around that exit before she could finish walking through it. There is a particular kind of tension that builds when someone decides they are leaving and the person they are leaving has not accepted it. Courtney had made her decision. She was living fully inside it, not nursing it as a wound, but treating it as a settled reality and moving forward from it. The romantic relationship was over. The next thing was untangling the business, ending the partnership, removing the last thread that kept Williams connected to her daily life and her financial future. On the 9th of December 2022, Courtney drove to Royal Court Motors. Prosecutors would later state that her presence at the dealership that afternoon was directly connected to the process of ending the business partnership. She was there to handle something specific, to take a concrete, documented step in a process that was already well underway. She was doing exactly what she had always done, showing up, moving forward, completing what she had started. She was leaving, and according to prosecutors, he had already decided what he was going to do about it. At some point before December 9th, Stoney Williams allegedly made a decision, not in a moment of rage. A cold, calculated decision that required planning and the deliberate involvement of another person to carry out. Prosecutors say he found Wesley Vickers and made him an offer, $20,000. $5,000 up front with the remaining $15,000 to be collected during the killing itself, staged as a robbery, so the real motive would disappear inside what looked like random street violence. He had already paid Vickers to shoot up the Fairburn house weeks earlier. That was the rehearsal. December 9th was the execution. Vickers walked into Royal Court Motors wearing a mask. He had a rifle. What happened inside that building is the reason Courtney's mother has spent every day since missing a piece of herself she will never get back. It is the reason a 12-year-old boy grew up without his mother. It is the reason we are here. Williams was at that same dealership that same evening. He spoke to detectives. He stood in the parking lot where Courtney had just been murdered, and he performed the grief of a devastated partner in front of the very people whose job it was to find out who was responsible. He answered every question. He stayed. He did everything a person with nothing to hide does when something terrible happens close to them. And then he went home. For weeks, investigators had a shooter and a working theory. What they did not yet have was the thread connecting the man who pulled the trigger to the man who allegedly paid him to do it. That thread existed. It was already there. And when it finally surfaced, it would come from the last place Williams should have allowed it to come from. If you are watching this on Silent Outcome, make sure you are subscribed before we go any further, because what Vickers told investigators about the night Williams came to him with that offer is the piece that blows this entire case open. Wesley Vickers was arrested on the 6th of January, 2023. Nearly a month had passed since the murder. During a court hearing that January, a detective took the stand and laid out what the investigation had uncovered. Williams had approached Vickers with a specific offer at a specific price. The details were not vague. They were not circumstantial. They were the kind of details that only exist because someone who was present for the conversation decided to talk. According to testimony, Vickers told investigators that Williams recruited him directly, named the figure, laid out the structure, and gave him the instruction to make the killing look like something it was not. The robbery staging, the payment schedule, all of it. That testimony did not just confirm a shooter, it named the man who drew the blueprint. Gwinnett County Police issued an arrest warrant for Williams in January 2023, and what happened next said everything about who he was and how he had always operated. He had been standing in that dealership parking lot the night of the murder. He had looked detectives in the eye and performed every expected behavior of a man with nothing to hide. He had watched the investigation develop from the inside, close enough to see exactly when it turned toward him. The moment Vickers was in custody and talking, Williams was gone. But not before he posted a tribute online for the woman prosecutors say he had paid to have killed. A public expression of loss and grief, carefully worded and posted for anyone to see. He built the performance all the way to the final moment. Then he vanished. Investigators released his photograph. They listed all 12 of his known aliases publicly. They asked for help. For 3 months, nobody could find him. When they finally located him, it was the 14th of April, 2023, Pasadena, Texas, just outside Houston. He was on a golf course, not underground, not watching every door and window of wherever he was sleeping that night, playing golf in the Texas sun 4 months after Courtney Owens was buried in Georgia. Local police took him into custody. He was extradited back to Gwinnett County and booked without bond. What came next is where the story takes the turn. Courtney's family is still living inside. Wesley Vickers went to trial. The evidence came in, the jury deliberated, and the verdict arrived: guilty. Murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. In February of 2024, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole plus 5 years. He was 24 years old. He will die behind bars. Then there was Stoney Williams. Williams had been charged with malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault, the same weight of charges as the man who physically carried out the killing. Courtney's family had sat through the investigation, watched the arrest warrant get issued, watched him get pulled off a golf course in Texas, and brought back in handcuffs. They had every reason to believe what came next would match the gravity of what prosecutors said he had done. That is not what happened. Williams entered an Alford plea, a mechanism where a defendant does not admit guilt but acknowledges that prosecutors have enough to likely win at trial. He never stood in front of a jury. He never had to sit in a courtroom while the full weight of the evidence against him was laid out publicly. He never had to look at Andrea Owens while 12 people decided what his role in her daughter's murder was worth. The charge he pleaded to was conspiracy to commit a crime, not murder, not the charge that carries the weight of what prosecutors say he orchestrated and funded. His sentence was 10 years. Of that 10 years, the only confinement he would serve was the approximately 11 months he had already spent waiting for a trial that never came. 11 months. He walked out on house arrest and probation. The doors opened, and he went home. The man who walked into Royal Court Motors with a rifle will die in a cell. The man prosecutors say put $20,000 on Courtney's life, who allegedly arranged the Fairburn shooting weeks before as a warning, who stood in that parking lot the night of the murder performing grief for detectives, who fled to Texas and played golf while Courtney's family buried her, served 11 months. He is on probation. Andrea Owens had already buried her daughter, had already held a 12-year-old boy through grief too large for his years, had already carried December 9th through every morning that came after it. And now she had to stand inside the specific, documented reality that the system built to finish what the investigation started, had handed the man, it said, ordered the killing an outcome that fit 11 months of his life. Her son, Courtney's son, inherited that outcome too. He will grow up knowing not just that his mother was murdered, but that the man prosecutors said paid for it came home. That is not an abstraction for a child. That is something he will carry in his body for the rest of his life. There is no legal statement that addresses what that costs a family. There is only the silence where justice should have been, and the people left standing inside it. There is a version of the 10th of December 2022 that should have existed. Courtney driving home from the dealership on a Friday evening, the weekend ahead of her, her son waiting. That version of the day was real, right up until it wasn't. And the distance between the version that should have happened and the one that did is where everyone who loved her has been living ever since. Andrea said it the only way it can honestly be said. A part of me is gone, not a chapter that closed. A part of me. She had watched Courtney build something from nothing. Had watched her become a business owner and a mother and a woman of quiet, determined purpose. Had watched her make the hard calls and follow through on them. And then one Friday afternoon in Snellville, that watching stopped, permanently, without the chance to say anything that needed to be said. Courtney's son was 12 years old when his mother did not come home. 12 is old enough to understand what has been taken, and not yet old enough to know the full dimensions of what that absence will cost across a lifetime. The graduations she will not be at. The ordinary Tuesdays that will carry her absence in ways that are hard to explain to anyone who has not felt them. The moments where the instinct to reach for her will arrive before the remembering does. He will carry her not as a choice, but as the only available option. It is simply what was left after December 9th took everything else. She had a son who needed her, a business that was almost hers, a Friday afternoon that should have been completely ordinary. Courtney Owens was 34 years old, and she was going somewhere, and the people who loved her deserved to watch her get there. If this story stayed with you, if you felt the weight of what happened to Courtney and what her family is still carrying, drop a comment and tell us how you think this case should have been handled. The next investigation on Silent Outcome is already underway. She had a son who needed her, a business that was almost hers, a Friday afternoon that should have been completely ordinary. Courtney Owens was 34 years old and she was going somewhere. She just never got there.
Now don't be afraid, because no credit, bad credit, it's all okay. We got new inventory in the front. Check us out at www.royalcourtmotors.com. All of our inventory is listed. We look forward to speaking with you.
Don't get robbed by the bank. We got you. We taking care of you right here at Royal Court Motors. We're right on the corner of Centerville Highway and Anniston Road in Snellville, across from the QT, and we neighbors with Walmart. Come out and see us today.
Check us out. Royal Court Motors, baby.